Merry meet, my fellow bookish witches. Welcome to Witchy Reads, a place where we talk about books and other bookish things. In addition to having the weather reach triple digits for a majority of the previous 3 months, I have also had a summer season jam-packed with books. It's time for my summer reading wrap-up. I am officially labeling this past season my Book Goblin summer because right at the beginning, I finally signed up for my library card. Let's just say I have very much enabled my book addiction by doing this.
Is it an addiction?
Is it an addiction? No, I think it's an addiction. I think it does put me, it makes me happy, but no, it's not an addiction.
Now let's go ahead and take a look back on the books I managed to get my hands on and what my final impressions of them were. The Catch by Amy Lea. This was a book club selection, I believe for the month of June. I'll be honest, I don't think I would have picked this one up had it not been picked for my book club. I could just tell this wasn't for me. It is the third book in Lea's influencer series, with the most well-known being the second in the series called X's and O's. At least that was the one I had heard of prior to reading this one. I won't go into too much detail on what the synopsis is or what my overall impressions were because I did that in a separate video, but I will give a brief TLDR. It is a contemporary romance that follows an annoying Instagram influencer on a work trip to Canada where she falls for a justifiably grumpy lobster fisherman. This book is riddled with trope upon trope that really don't do anything to engage readers. I personally felt the overall plot didn't work and was a letdown by how flat the characters were portrayed, especially considering this is meant to be similar to the film While You Were Sleeping, which, while not a great rom-com, it still has a sense of whimsy and heart that I felt this book was lacking big time. That's why I ultimately rated The Catch 1 star, and I think that was fairly generous. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This was also a book club pick for the month of July. I can honestly tell you I had a way better time with this one, even though it made me openly cry. I have talked about getting more into sci-fi, and I think this was the perfect read to bridge that gap in my reading. I did also cover this book in a separate video, so please make sure to check that out if you want a more detailed synopsis of the book and my overall experience in reading it. This book had some of the most fleshed out characters I have ever had the pleasure to read. I think this also encapsulates everything positive about the found family trope. While I can see why some might call this a little too positive considering we are dealing with multiple alien species, government politics, war, etc., I don't think it's a bad thing to hope for an idealized world in which we are all able to travel through space. I rated The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet 5 stars. Is it realistic? Probably not. Is it worth the read? Absolutely. I would love to continue this series and probably will in the near future once I finish all the other books I have lined up. Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. The first of these was another book selected for my book club for the month of August. And because I took the insane cliffhanger in the first one personally, I immediately read the second book. Thankfully, this is a duology because each of these books were over 500 pages long. I chose to read both of these through audiobook, partly because of the length, but also because the voice actor who reads for the woman main character is Carissa Vacker. I love how she reads books. The previous book I've read on audiobook by Carissa Vacker was What Wild Women Do by Karma Brown, which I also really enjoyed. Both of these books are a mix of fantasy mobster, as we follow Kazi, who is a member of a special forces for a queen in a specific kingdom. She has been sent to another kingdom to search for a fugitive that is responsible for murdering some of her queen's family members. So basically committing like royal murder. I think this could have been explained better. It took me getting a ways into the story to fully understand what her mission was. The location of this fugitive is in a town within this kingdom that is essentially separated by the rest of the kingdom and is run by what is, for lack of a better word, a mob family. This is where we meet Jace, who has recently taken over as the head of his family. Through multiple instances of misunderstandings and tropes, Cassie and Jace are forced together and fall in love while being surrounded by kingdom intrigue and adventure. I did enjoy the second book more because it focused more on the espionage and kingdom shenanigans. Not to say the romance wasn't good, it just wasn't the highlight for me. Personally, I enjoyed each of the characters separately more than I enjoyed them being together. For Dance of Thieves, I am giving 3.75 stars. For Vow of Thieves, I am giving 4 stars. The Unmothers by Leslie J. Anderson. I know it might seem early, but I couldn't wait to get into reading some horror books. That is why I decided to pick up The Unmothers. That and its supposed coverage of the woman experience through the haze of a horror story, which, let's be honest, isn't that far of a stretch. This book was recently published in August of this year. In fact, was one of my anticipated August horror releases. This book is set up to be this small town horror and is heavily implied that the atmosphere will reflect as such. But honestly, it didn't deliver, and in fact, the atmosphere breaks down fairly quickly and left me not feeling the fear that I'm sure the book wanted me to feel. I also think this book was specifically marketed to be on the side of women's autonomy, and I did not feel that at all. Quite the opposite, actually, which was disappointing and in some cases infuriating. I'm sad that this was the book to kick off my spooky book season, but since I am planning a separate video to go more in depth of what didn't work with this book, I'm going to hold off on giving it a final rating. A Mask of Flies by Matthew Lyons. This was the second spooky book that I decided to read to get into the spooky season spirit, and I think this one did a much better job, though I wouldn't say it was perfect. What it is extremely visceral, serious trigger warning for body horror, gore, and death if you decide to pick this one up. The synopsis does say that it is similar to the films It Follows and The Evil Dead. I will say that isn't too far off, though what I thought was similar to The Evil Dead wasn't what I thought. I actually think that that was the book's weakest point. I also think the book was far scarier in the beginning when the monster was still a bit of a mystery. I think that should have been something that continued throughout the book because the explanation for the monster was super disappointing. The only reason I didn't realize it until it was too late is because the body horror is pretty much never ending in this. I'm not saying that's a bad thing because I actually do think it is written pretty well. It's just that it is a lot and it makes it hard to focus on literally anything else that is going on in the story. I did really enjoy the writing. Overall, the plot was coherent and interesting, and I was so invested in the characters, even though they technically weren't good people. It was more of a wild ride than it was being scary, and I will also be doing a separate video for this. So I'm going to, again, hold off on giving it a final rating in this video. Read at Your Own Risk by Remy Lea. I have mentioned countless times before that I love dark middle grade stories. This was no exception. This is a graphic novel and it is a very quick read that walks that line of just the right amount of spooks for this age group. I enjoyed this for the illustrations and that the book seemed to weave real world fears into what a middle schooler would view as a fear fantasy, for lack of a better explanation. The main character thinks she is cursed by an entity brought to life when she and her friends perform what is essentially a seance. The story is played out through the main character's journal entries, and we then see the entity take over and write in the journal as well. I thought this was extremely clever and made the story so much more fun, but also a tad bit juvenile, so just be aware of that. That's not meant to be a bad thing because I think it needs to have that in order to appeal to the correct correct age group. While I do think the images are similar to the Scary Stories books, I wouldn't say the story matches that level of scary, because I read those books in elementary/middle school and they were terrifying. I still find them terrifying, especially because of those illustrations, but I wouldn't classify this at the same level. It was fun, and I think I would gladly give this to my little one once he is in the appropriate age range. I rated Read at Your Own Risk 3.75 stars. Men Have Called Her Crazy by Anna Marie Tendler. I picked up this memoir because I had heard that it was such a good exploration into women's mental health through the eyes of a real person who went through a deep mental health crisis that was largely ignored and, worse, villainized. Anna Marie Tendler is the ex-wife of comedian John Mulaney. That is all I will say about her ex-husband, because my giving that brief explanation has given him way more page time than she does in her own book. For good reason. I was drawn to this because I wanted her side of things. I thought there was way too much negativity being pushed her way that I felt was completely unjustified. If nothing else, this book confirmed that my feelings were correct. Additionally, this book does a beautiful job of describing the highs and lows of a mental health crisis experienced by a woman and the road that ultimately led her to that place. It is so well written, weaving in what is happening in present time, her hospitalization at the beginning of 2020, with flashbacks of her childhood and teenage years. Tendler's story gives a thorough examination for why we say men and shouldn't need to follow that up with, yes, we know it's not all of you. I rated Men Have Called Her Crazy 5 stars. Highly recommend it. In fact, I think more men should read books like this. I will say, if you are going through your own mental health situation, just be aware this may not be the best book to read during that time. Just wanted to put that out there. I feel like you definitely need to be in a certain headspace to appreciate and take something away from the book Come Out by Natalie C. Parker. This was probably my most anticipated August horror release. It did not disappoint. It is a YA queer horror, and my God, does it hit everything that someone in the queer community would feel when having to keep who they really are a secret. As a bisexual woman, I was immediately drawn in and empathized with the three main characters. I think the most common feelings that could be felt by a member of the queer community is especially felt in the character of Fern, who is non-binary, treading on the track of being trans. Even though I myself am not trans, I was still able to feel all of the emotions that come with coming to terms with who you are. The character of Jack goes through a similar situation, and if I'm being honest, her experience is more set in the horror of it all, as she seems to be more affected by the situation for not only hiding the fact she is a lesbian, but because she also has extremely Christian parents as well as a boyfriend. We get to follow the point of view of not only these two characters, but that of their friend in the past prior to her death, until everything culminates in the finale. This book is very well done, and I think creates that sense of dread that most, if not all, queer kids experience when they come to terms with who they are and just want to shout that out to the world. But for circumstances maybe beyond their control, they aren't able to. There are sweet moments as well that I think highlight the scarier moments perfectly. Having said that, this is very much a YA book, so don't expect too much in the way of something deeply scary. I would recommend this to anyone in the LGBTQIA community because I just think it is such a fantastic queer story. I plan on doing a more full-length video for this book, so I will not be giving it a final rating at this time. The Nightbirds by Kate J. Armstrong, The Isle of the Gods by Amy Kaufman, The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields, Alice in Borderland by Haro Asso, Slewfoot by Brahm, The House Switch by Delamake. If you've been following along with the secret project that I was a part of called Battle of the BookTubers, you will know that I was recommended 4 different books to read and rate through a series of vlogs for a competition. This competition is currently ongoing. If you would like my thoughts and ratings, please go check out those vlogs. On to the stats. I am actually really impressed with how many books I read during this reading season. I ended up reading 15 books in total, 11 ebooks, 4 audiobooks, and 0 physical books. 0 of the books I read were ARC requests, which I think is actually a first for me. 4 were purchased, and those were all of the audiobooks through Audible. And I am happy to say that the 11 ebooks were all borrowed through my Libby app from my library. In total, I read 3,953 pages and listened to 57 hours and 1 minute of audiobooks. With these books, I am currently sitting at 36 books read for the year, which means I am more than likely going to hit my total goal of 50 books read for 2024. I am so excited for that. I think this was my most read season, and I did have a very good time diving into these reads. I do hope that this becomes part of my regular reading habit. I have found so many more great books that I have added to my TBR, which potentially could be a problem. Of course, more recently, those books added have been horror reads for this upcoming spooky season, and I am very much looking forward to reading those. I hope that my next reading season is just as successful. It is my time to shine, and I am so excited for the reads that I have planned this next season. What books are you planning to read for the autumn or spooky season? Do you lean more into horror or cozy autumn vibes? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell to get notified for all of my other videos. Until our next chapter together, merry part and blessed be.